Hello. In this video, I thought I'd take you through some of the more unusual books that I own. So, firstly, I thought I'd show you these. You can probably see immediately they're a little strange. They're much smaller than typical paperbacks, certainly much smaller than a hardback, and they're presented in landscape rather than portrait. So these are called flipback books, and they were invented by a fellow from the Netherlands, I believe. I've forgotten his name, but I'll link it below. And they were designed to solve two problems that you might have with a traditional book. The first one, as I just mentioned, is the size. So let's say you're going away on holiday, or you're just travelling for whatever reason, and you want to bring some books with you. Well, standard size paperback, you could probably only fit 2 or 3 in your bag, your suitcase, whatever. But these smaller ones, you can fit a lot more. They're a lot lighter, they're a lot smaller, they take up less room. So that's one problem they try to solve. And the other problem is the question of how to improve the process of reading one-handed. So, let's say you're commuting on a train or a bus, you're standing up and you have to hold on to the railings, but you want to read your book with one hand. Obviously, it's possible to do that with a normal paperback. I'm sure we've all done it, I certainly have, but it's not always easy. Well, with these flipback books, they're designed in such a way that it's meant to be easier to open them with one hand. And the way you do that is you flip it open with your thumb and you turn the pages vertically with your thumb, like this, rather than horizontally as you would with a standard book. And I think it's very effective. I think more than anything, these little books, and I do like little books, I think these books are charming, just absolutely charming. They didn't take off, so there aren't many of them around. The company, I believe, is still going, and perhaps they're very popular elsewhere, but certainly in the UK you don't see these in the shops. So I've bought mine on auction websites because I'm so charmed by them. I don't have very many because they are a little too expensive. But now and then I'll treat myself and buy one. I don't have many because there aren't very many that have been printed that are books that I would read anyway. So these two, for example, are books that I enjoy and have enjoyed. Jasper Fforde is a really great Welsh writer. He writes funny fantasy, I suppose, but it's also elements of magical realism. His work tends to be very intertextual. So if you're a bit of a reader, you'd probably enjoy Jasper Fforde. There's a lot of references to other works in his books, and usually quite funny. And then, of course, Jane Austen. It's just always good to have Jane Austen around. We all know about her, so I won't go on there. But yeah, I just thought I would share these because they're a very unusual design, but very, very, very pleasant. They're nice to feel as well. The pages think in order to keep them small and in order to keep the weight down, they obviously made a decision to use very thin paper, and it's much like, I don't know if you ever bought those small cheap Bibles, or had, just had one in your life somewhere. It's that same sort of paper, which actually feels really quite nice, quite delicate, but I've not torn any of the pages on this, and it keeps the weight down, keeps it small, and makes it nice to hold and touch and feel. So I highly recommend trying to hunt one of these down. Particularly good as a gift if you have any readers in your life and you're thinking, what can I get them for Christmas or birthday? These are actually quite fun because chances are they've either never seen one or they know of them but they've never been able to buy one. But if you check eBay or similar websites, you can find these. Just search for flipback book. They are overpriced currently because, well, certainly in the UK, they're overpriced because they don't really sell them anymore. But as a special gift, it's maybe worth spending the money because it's so rare to find something novel about the novel, I suppose. So it's a real treat and quite nice, quite pleasing. The other book that I want to talk about is this one here. It's called Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Now, this is a book that's written in Middle English. First of all, why do I have this? Well, it was part of my education. I had to learn this. What I had to do was translate the Middle English into present-day English, which I can tell you is not easy. So let me just open it up first so you can see what Middle English looks like. Then I'll talk a bit more about the story. So there we are. That is what Middle English looks like. So first of all, what is Middle English? Well, it's the way we used to talk and write between the years 1100 and 1500. It's a little confusing. I think some people think Middle English is Old English. That's something else entirely. Old English looks really nothing like present-day English. It sounds completely different. So that's Anglo-Saxon English. That was really anything written up to 1100. And then from 1100 up to 1500 you have Middle English, but then that's further complicated because there's early Middle English and late Middle English. So I'd say between 1100 and 1350, everything written around that time would be described as early Middle English, and from 1350 up to 1500 you're then looking at late Middle English, and then from 1500 onwards you have modern day English, and then at some point we have present day English. Well, I suppose that's now, but in modern day English, obviously English sounded really rather different even in the 1600s. The point is it just continues to evolve and change over the years. So the Middle English period corresponds roughly with the centuries that lie between the Norman conquest, which is 1066, and William Caxton's introduction of the printing press in 1475. And that makes sense if you think about it, because once a printing press comes to be, and literature starts to be produced on a mass scale, there needs to be some sort of formalization. There needs to be some sort of there need to be rules in place if you're going to start putting things out, in large numbers. So, yeah. On to the story, though, of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. If you don't know it, it's highly irregular, I would say. How to summarise? It's quite complicated at the same time. So the story begins with, and I've not read this in a long time, so I'll be a bit patchy on the details, but the story begins with Sir Gawain having a banquet on New Year's Eve, and suddenly it's disrupted by a giant green knight. And I mean that quite literally. He is a knight, a man who is green, and I believe he's a giant. And he challenges anyone in the room to attempt to chop his head off. Oh, he's got an axe as well, this green knight. He wields an axe. And he says to this room of people, I challenge you to chop my head off with this axe. He says, but afterwards I will also I will return the favour. I will also attempt to chop your head off if you fail to chop my head off. No one says anything, and then finally Sir Gawain says, okay, I'll do it. And he takes the axe and he chops the Green Knight's giant head off in one fell swoop. And then the giant picks his own head up, puts it under his arm, I think, or puts it back on his neck, can't remember, and says, right then, I'll see you in a year, where you must travel to me, and I will chop your head off, because that was the rule. So then, a year later, or nearly a year later, Sir Gawain sets off to the Green Knight's chapel, and on his way he stops at a magnificent castle, and there are 3 days left until he's due to meet the Green Knight. And the owners of the castle, the lord and the lady of the castle, say, oh, well, not to worry, there's a shortcut to the Green Knight's chapel from here, you'd get there in no time. So spend the next 3 days here with us, and, at the very least you'll have a warm place to sleep, and we'll feed you and we'll look after you until the deed must be done. And he thanks them kindly, and he stays there. Then something rather odd happens. The lord of the castle says, I'm going to go out hunting in the day, and whatever I catch in my hunt, I'll return a portion of that to you on the condition that whatever you're offered at the castle, you must return to me. So Gawain says, fair enough, and he goes off on the hunt, the lord goes off on the hunt, and Gawain he stays at the castle. And as he's staying, and the husband's away, the wife, the lady, offers him a kiss. And he receives the kiss, and then when the lord returns, he offers Gawain some of the game that he caught, and Gawain, an honourable knight, returns the kiss to the lord. Second day, Gawain is given 2 kisses. The lord comes back, he offers some of the game. Gawain gives 2 kisses to this lord. Third day, he is given 3 kisses and a green sash, which the of the house says, if you wear this green sash, don't tell anyone, but if you wear it, it will protect you from the Green Knight, and you'll be safe. But don't tell anyone. So the Lord returns, and Sir Gawain returns the 3 kisses that he receives, but he doesn't return the sash. And the deal was, when he was out, Gawain had to tell him everything that was going on and return what he had received. But he keeps the sash quiet because he's worried that without it he'll die. So the time comes for him to go on his journey, because it's the 3rd day now. He must go to the chapel and confront the Green Knight. So he goes there, and he's wearing the green sash, and the Green Knight tells him to put his head on the block, and he does as he's told, and he swings for him, and he stops, and he goes, aha, the whole thing was a test of your honesty, and you failed because you wore the green sash. And it turns out that the Green Knight was under a spell, a witch, some sort, I can't remember her name, had put Lord Bertilac, turns out that's who the Lord of the castle was, under some sort of spell that allowed him to transform himself into this Green Knight. And all of these tests were to see if the Green Knight would reveal that he'd been given this sash, and he didn't. And so then, whether Gawain would reveal he'd been given this sash, and he hadn't. So then Gawain feels terrible, but he's consoled by Lord Bertilac, and he says, "Don't worry. You admit that you got it wrong, and we're all flawed, and we should use this as a reminder, use this moment as a reminder that we are all flawed." And so what Sir Gawain's other knights do is they all wear a green sash around them, or they wear a green armband or something like that, to remind them that, well, despite the best of intentions, we are flawed. So that's the rather bizarre and unusual story of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. I do apologise if I got any details wrong or missed anything out. I did miss a few things out, I'm sure of it, but that's the general gist of it, at least. Now you're probably wondering what Middle English sounds like. Well, I have not read or translated Middle English in a long old time, so I will just read the first few lines here to give you an idea, but I'll preface it by saying that I will get some of the pronunciation and definitely the accent will be off, but nonetheless, here's what it sounds like. Sithen the siege and the assault was seized at Troy, the Borg Britaned and Brent to Brondes and Askers, the Tulk that the Tramus of Treason the rocked, was treated for his treachery, the truest on earth. So, I butchered that, by the way, but I would say actually that's a fairly close approximation. So what that means, roughly, is since the siege and the assault that was seized upon Troy, that burnt the city to ashes, the knight that was wrought with treason was tried for his treachery, the truest on earth. Yes, sorry, I forgot to mention the story begins with a very unusual mythological history of Britain, in which it states that after Troy fell, various nobles fled and set up different countries. So Romulus fled and set up Rome, and it said that Brutus was the individual who set up England, founded England. Obviously that's not true, but that's how the story begins. I don't know why. I've forgotten why that's in there. So, yeah, that's Middle English for you, and that's Gawain and the Green Knight. It's very interesting. There are some good translations out there. Tolkien, I think there's a Tolkien translation. I think. I could be wrong on that. But there are a lot. There are many, and there are some more modern than others. So it's worth checking a few out, because the story is so, as I say, irregular and unusual that it's worth your time. It is worth your time. And then finally, I thought I would just very quickly show you this book here, which is called A Humument, which is by an artist called Tom Phillips. So this is something called an altered book, and it's an artwork that takes a book from a Victorian book from 1892 by W.H. Mallock called A Human Document, and it distorts the author/artist distorts that book in various ways. So he draws, paints and collages over the pages, but leaves patches of the original text showing through to tell a new story using the words of this other story to do so. And it's just a very unusual idea, not something I'd seen before, and quite fun to dip in and out of. It looks quite interesting as well, because he's not just blocked it out with big black marker, he's drawn on it, and the artwork's interesting, the paint is interesting, the story is interesting. It's not. It takes some strange twists and turns, and it's more of a prose poem, I would say, than a typical narrative. It's not linear in any way. And the protagonist, called Bill Togue, can actually only appear when the words together or all together emerge from the text. So until that happens, you don't hear from the protagonist. But it's interesting what these limitations can do to a book, to a story, what that means for the story, what it means to take someone else's story and manipulate it in such a way to create something brand new. Quite extraordinary, really, quite remarkable. And I just thought I'd throw this in at the end here, because it's worth checking out. You can find this. This is usually in stock everywhere. It's a favourite of mine to give as a gift, because it's difficult not to enjoy it, really. So that's a Humument anyway. I realise this has gone on a little bit too long now, so I'll save the other books for another video. But thank you all so much for listening. I really appreciate all of your kind comments and support. It means so much. And thank you.